The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vinish Sandir, the Director of Marketing at ALM, and we're very excited to get this special webinar happening for you today. And before we actually begin, just want to do a quick audio check, make sure everybody can hear me loud and clear. Larry, just say a quick hello, so I just want to make sure people can hear you as well.
Hey Vanish, hello everyone. Thanks for coming today. Hope yeah, we got a great show for you.
Terrific, terrific. So we're getting a bunch of yeses. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. A couple of quick housekeeping items. If during the webinar, Larry's going to essentially blow your mind today with some of the information that he has. There's some pretty cool experiments that Larry's been running that he's going to share with us today. If you have any questions whatsoever at any point in time, feel free to type that in the chat box. I'll be moderating today's session, and I can definitely take any questions towards the end of the session. So Larry will make sure that we'll save 5 or 10 minutes and address a couple questions that you guys might have. And outside of that, again, I want to introduce Larry Kim to today's webinar. Larry needs no introduction. If I have to introduce him to you guys should probably not be in this webinar today. But Larry's had a really, really great run with WordStream. He recently quit WordStream and he's actually joined another startup, which seems pretty exciting. And we'll have more information for you as the startup actually develops. So that should be pretty interesting. And in today's session, Larry's really going to be talking about SEO. He done a really good session for us at the beginning of the year, which was focusing on PPC. Very, very well received. And today's session's around SEO. Larry's going to be talking about some really cool experiments that he's been doing recently. He's going to be covering things on related to the Fred update. He's going to be talking about Rankbrain, some other actionable hacks on improving organic click-through rates. So without giving much of the information out and stealing Larry's thunder, I'll actually hand it over to Larry at this stage. Larry, welcome to the webinar.
Awesome, thanks guys, and thank you WSI community for hosting me. I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's a great community, and it's just so great to have for this opportunity. So, all right, let's get to the chase here. Basically, guys, I have a crazy SEO theory, and the theory goes like this. It has to do with the fact that Google uses user engagement rates, user engagement rates like signals like click-through rates, dwell time, time on site, etc., to determine, to rank and that this plays a big role in ranking organic search listings, and basically kind of this is the idea of how machine learning in general works, and basically every time a user does a search for something. It used to be all based on the links and keywords to the pages, and Google would just have kind of this ranking. Now it's kind of they've introduced this new layer. It's kind of a machine learning layer where it guesses to see, basically it additions the content to see whether or not it's a good fit for the user's query. It then checks to see if it satisfies the result or not. Like, did it have a good click-through rate, or did the person stay on the page, or did they bounce away? If the query came back as being scoring correctly, then I think what happens is Google remembers this and will be more likely to serve up that result next time it sees a query like that. If not, it's gonna it's going to try additioning a different page. And so that's kind of the theory. Google has been pretty clear that they've been saying things like, oh, we don't use user engagements like click-through rate as a direct ranking factor, but that's causing a lot of people to panic and say, like, this is a lot of crap. But here's the thing I just wanted to point out. I'm sure you guys know this. These Google SEO spokespersons, a lot of SEOs think that it's like SEO Jesus speaking or something like this, as if as if they know the truth or whatever. And I just wanted to point out they're basically just a bunch of technical support representatives, glorified technical support representatives. I did a lookup on this guy, and you'd think that he was like freaking the CEO of Google or something, but actually he's not. He just works for some guy who works for some other guy who works for some other guy who works for some other guy who happens to work for the CEO who works for Larry Page. So it's like, 6-7 degrees down the food chain, and they don't always get things right. Remember they had all those claims about like mobile get-in being 10 times worse than like Panda and Penguin combined or something like that. And then when it got released, we never even realized that it was released because it was like not a big deal. They always make these big claims, and they're always wrong. So the thing I love about SEO is that there's datas, and then you've got these like dumb opinions of these like technical support people. It doesn't matter what both think or say. What matters is what's the actual result. In SEO, you run your tests and you see what happens, and you try to reproduce them across your different clients, and that's kind of the answer. Okay, like it might even be better to just not listen to any of these talking heads, including myself. Like even if you don't believe any of this stuff that I'm showing you today, at least take the experiment ideas and run them yourself on your clients to see what happens. All right. So before getting into all the crazy hacks and experiments, I wanted to just kind of introduce myself briefly. So my name's Larry. I am a little bit obsessed with unicorns. I started my company, back in 2008. I'm probably like a lot of you guys. I understand that WSI, you're a bunch of, like agency owners and consulting people. So I was kind of like that. I was just doing my own consulting gig all by myself. I didn't even have a co-founder. I was set up in this Panera Bread here. It's a bakery here in the USA. And I picked this one because it had free Wi-Fi and unlimited Diet Coke refills. I didn't even have a team or anything like that. But basically, I was just working on doing consulting work and building software. The company, over the last 5 years here, it's grown tremendously, over 3,000% in revenues, from $1 million business back in 2011 to a $33.5 million business last year. So we're growing at roughly 100% a year. So I know a thing or two about agency growth. Take it from me here, the company people, you're hiring 3 people a week kind of thing, and we're the largest Google's partners in terms of being able to we manage basically $1 billion of ad spend for Google and other places every year. And we're their largest partner in the world, in the universe. So WordStream is the #1 provider of pay-per-click advertising software. And and a couple of years ago, we moved out of the bakery, and today we're in the Prudential Mall, which is in Boston. All right. And one last thing, I left the company a few months ago to try some new software idea that I have here, because I'm a software engineer, and basically I'm building like a kind of a chatbot software tool, which I'd love to be able to share with you early next year. So it's like just mobile AI kind of stuff. I have a 3-year-old kid, and that's all about me, guys. Back to our story. We're talking about our crazy SEO experiments that will blow your mind, but not only the experiments, but also what does it mean, and what do you need to do about it in terms of like changing your tactics and strategies for SEO. All right, so #1 crazy SEO experiment here has to do with searching for a machine learning fingerprint within the search algorithms, right? So if Rankbrain and Fred and all these things are taking over the algorithms, we should be able to see them, right? We should be able to see evidence of their existence. Now, the challenge here with machine learning is it's not like those big Panda updates from like 5-10 years ago where they would just release a big update and overnight your traffic would disappear. You see what I'm saying? Or it's more incremental stuff there. It's live. It continuously updates the search results like a little bit by a little bit every day, every minute, every hour. And so it's very difficult to observe. And so what I did was I used kind of this notion of time-lapse photography. So because these changes are more gradual and incremental, one of the ways that I can kind of observe changes is by setting up these longer time-lapse photography experiments where I take a look at 1,000 keywords and their average position and their average click-through rates, and then graphing those averages and seeing how they change over time. And so this is like 1,000 keywords that I looked at in May and June and September of last year, taking snapshots like at 2-month intervals. And you could see what was happening last year was that the keywords that had higher click-through rates were floating to higher positions, and the keywords that had lower click-through rates were sinking to the bottom of the search engine ranking page, of the search listings page. And it's really hard to see this kind of stuff in your analytics, because what's happening is it's not like there's a big drop in traffic. What's happening is it's a reshuffling of traffic. Your great pages are going to get a little more traffic, and your crappy pages are going to get a little less traffic. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like a reallocation. So it doesn't look like one of those big bombs where like 50% of your traffic is gone overnight. So that's kind of the idea here. So that proves to me, at least, that exists. If you happen, you can do that experiment yourself. If you happen to save Webmaster Tools data, like one thing you should be doing, guys, is you should be going into Webmaster Tools and saving your query data like every month, because I think they only last for like 2 months or 90 days or something like that. So next idea here has to do with figuring out if it's true that higher click-through rates yields higher rankings. Can I do an experiment where I change the click-through rate of a page and see how that actually changes the ranking of that page, right? So obviously, ranking impacts click-through rate. If the higher your rank, the higher your click-through rate. If you're in position 1, you're going to have a much higher click-through rate than in position 2. But what I'm asking is the reverse true? Okay, so is there some kind of a feedback loop in Google where if Google notices that you're getting much higher than expected click-through rate, so say like the average click-through rate is for 15% for position 2, if you're getting 20 or 25% in that second spot, will Google actually promote you to the first spot because you're doing so well? And so basically I did this experiment over thousands and thousands of keywords, and indeed, so what you're looking at is a summary of the experiment, which is relative click-through rate compared to the organic position. So relative click-through rate is this keyword beating or being beaten by the expected position for a given spot, okay? Right, because click-through rates vary by position, so we're just trying to see, like, is it doing better or worse than expected, and then charting that versus position. And basically what it boils down to is if you can beat the expected click-through rate for a given position by 3%, Google will then notice that and give you a bump of 1% in ranking. That's sort of the rule of thumb on average, when I look across the thousands of keywords. So I wanted to give you one of these examples of actually modifying the headline and making it more clicky and showing you exactly what happens. Okay, so this is just one example. By the way, I didn't just do one example, I did hundreds of them. But this is one that I wanted to just showcase because it's very easy to understand. So the original title was Guerrilla Marketing, 20 plus examples and strategies to stand out. It had a 1% click-through rate and it was ranking number 8. One thing I did was I kept the words the same. So like the primary words, guerrilla marketing, example strategies. I didn't want to change the words because, as you know, Google indexes the keywords. And so if I add new keywords and stuff, it could rank for different things. So I was just trying to make this more catchy in a way that was kind of the least disturbing the title. So I put the number to the front. Now it's 20 plus jaw-dropping guerrilla marketing examples and strategies. So just reordering the words to be a little bit more catchy. And of course, the click-through rate shot up to 4.2%, and it has a rank of number 5. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that it had a massive impact on SEO traffic. So it wasn't just like a little bit more traffic. It went from generating over 3,000 page views per month to 7,400 page views a month, okay? The reason for this is twofold. Okay, so it's 112% increase in organic traffic. The reason for this is because when you boost your click-through rates, even if you don't change the ranking, okay, you're the same ranking number 5 or whatever, higher click-through rates, if you double the click-through rates, you'll get double the traffic. You see what I'm saying? But what happens is not only do you get more traffic from the higher click-through rates, Google notices that you're killing it and that the click-through rate is way higher than is expected. And so you also get a bonus ranking improvement, which means more clicks. So there's nothing else like this in SEO where you get like double whammy here, like in terms of a positive boost. So my number 4 crazy experiment today had to do with engagement rates and trying to understand if the time on site and bounce rate and this kind of stuff, does that have anything to do with click-through rates? Because obviously I think the click-through rates make a big deal in terms of the rankings, but what about bounce rates and time on site? So we know that Google measures dwell time. Dwell time is it's basically something measured by Google that computes like how much time did it take for you to do the search and then click on a page until you hit back to the same search result page. So it's like whether or not you hit back and how long that took. And so we know that this is true, that we know they measured it because like a few years ago they had this feature where you could block pages from a certain site, but this option would only show up if you hit back within like 3, 4, 5 seconds, okay? If you stayed on a page for a very, very long time and you hit back, the option to block would not appear. So that indicates that they were timing, like how long does it take for people to hit back, and that's known as dwell time. So we can't measure dwell time, but it's kind of proportional to and directionally equivalent to time on site or bounce rate, basically. Another thing that you may have seen is if you do a search on mobile and if you hit back quickly, see how it says people also search for? That box only shows up if it was a relatively short session. If it was a long session, that doesn't show up. And so basically, all I did for this was just looking at the bounce rates of different pages. You know, is it 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80% bounce rate? Okay. And then looking at the rankings of those pages. And sure enough, there was a relationship that the lower the bounce rates, the higher your rankings. But what is so unusual about this experiment was that there was this mysterious kink in the graph. You see how it's not a smooth line? It's like it's a discontinuous function. So basically what I discovered here was that if your bounce rate is low enough, then you're eligible to be in the top 4 positions. So that looks algorithmic in nature because it's so kinked, like around position 4 and 5. And then once you get to position 5, you become less and less likely to show up in the first page as your bounce rate increases because those are strong signals that your page wasn't what people were looking for. Now keep in mind here, it's just a pass-fail. So even if you get your bounce rates lower to 50% or 40% or 30%, it's not like you get any bonus points. It's just it just has to be low enough to get a pass, but beyond there, you don't get any extra points for being even better. And that's a little bit like how Google AdWords works. So Google AdWords, they in the quality score, it looks at your landing page metrics, and it's basically just a pass-fail. Is the page good enough quality? If so, you get a pass. If it's horrible, then you fail and the ads stop working. So same thing with time on site, which is kind of correlated to bounce rate. As long as people were sticking, for like 4 or 5 minutes, then you were eligible to show up in positions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Conversely, if you were really short sessions, like less than 2 minutes, then you were likely to show up in lower positions like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right. Same idea, there was this discontinuity, which suggests there's some kind of a algorithmic interference happening here. It's not a truly natural relationship. All right, so we're here to my number 5 crazy SEO experiment, and that has to do with featured snippets. So featured snippets, a lot of talk around like position 0, and you need to rank on position 0, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what's really crazy about featured snippets is that it's a different algorithm from just a regular organic search. Do you see what I'm saying? So the regular organic search, if if the featured snippet algorithm was the same as ranking regular pages, then all of the snippets would just be drawn from the first entry. Okay, but here's a query for what is link building, and I love this. WordStream has the snippet, even though Moz and Search Engine Watch are ranking number 1, 2, and 3, and have exact match. They have exact match title tags. You see what I'm saying? WordStream, on the other hand, doesn't even have an exact match, but yet somehow it is getting the snippet in position 4 for the term link building. And so I know that snippet selection is not based on the classical ranking factors like links and keywords alone, because most of the time the snippets are taken from position 1, but like 66% of the time, the snippet is coming from positions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way through to 71. This was just like looking at a few thousand snippets across my own site. And so that led me to believe that like there's something else going on with the snippet algorithm. Let's figure out what it is. And so a lot of people think that it has to do with just, as long as your content has a snippable sentence that kind of fits, 30, 40, 50 characters, that's how they choose the winner. But I'm like, no, that can't be all, because what if there were two identical pages, that both had, snippable content around 30, 40, 50 keywords long? Google would still need to choose one over the other. There has to be some other deciding factor, if you will. You know what I mean? So it's not the whole story. It helps to have content that's snippable, but there's more to it than that. And so to do this investigation, what I did was I looked at the outliers. So this was a crazy example called how to get more Bing rewards points. So WordStream has the snippet here, okay? How to get more Bing rewards point, but it's being pulled from position 10. It's crazy, okay? And look at who we're jumping over here, okay? So it's like Bing.com, okay? Like, really? We're gonna outrank Bing.com. And there's the official Bing YouTube channel. There's like MSN forums. You see what I'm saying? Like these Reddit, these are really great sites that are more authoritative and have more links. But somehow WordStream got the snippet, even though it was in position 10. So I really wanted to hack this thing and figure out what was going on. And basically what I found was that this query, okay, this page has a freaking 20% click-through rate, okay, even though it's in position 10, okay? Like, do you know what the average click-through rate is for position 10? It's like 2 or 3%, okay? So this page, the one that was getting the snippet, had a 10 times higher than expected click-through rate for its position. And that led me to believe that, maybe that's one of the reasons why this page was selected, because it had an unusually high click-through rate for its position. The other thing that I noticed about this page was it had unusually high time on site. So typically, time on site for my blog, it might be 3, 4, 5 minutes. This page had a 14-minute, 28-second time on page. Holy smokes, that's like 4 times more than average. So that got me kind of creating a theory that maybe it has something to do with unusually long time on site and an unusually high click-through rate. And so what I did was I took that theory and back-tested it for hundreds and hundreds of other pages that were ranking low in the SERPs, like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, where they were being featured as snippets. And sure enough, what I found was what they had in common was they all had unusually high time on site and unusually high click-through rates. So I think that kind of solves this problem. I mean, it's really simple for you to check yourself. Just look at your own snippets and then look at the time on page and look at the click-through rates for that page in Google Analytics and Google Search Console, and you can convince yourself of this. My number 6 experiment today has to do with trying to figure out the the relationship between organic shares and SEO rankings. So if you've ever done any SEO in your life, you've probably noticed a huge connection that the content that you have that's ranking the best, like number 1, 2, 3 rankings and driving all this traffic, they also often do very well when shared on social media. And so some SEOs actually think that maybe Google is like counting the Facebook likes and counting the Twitter shares and the Google plus ones. A lot of people thought that Google Plus was designed to just get social signals for content, and basically, what's that relationship, and why is there always that correlation that we see? And of course, Google, they always deny it. They always say we don't use Facebook or Twitter signals to rank pages. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know why Google would ever want to, rely on external companies to help them rank their own content. That seems like a kind of a dumb thing to do. But nevertheless, the correlation exists, and we always see the relationship. And so, one thing I did was I just took 1,000 pages, and I looked at two things. I looked at what is the relative click-through rate of that high-ranking content. Okay, what's the relative click-through rate when like on Google search versus the click-through rate when I share the same content on Facebook. So if I take that same page and put it on Facebook as a post, what's the click-through rate? And there was this huge relationship. Basically, the higher the ranking, so basically it's the same content that does really, really well in terms of high click-through rates on search, gets high click-through rates on Facebook. And so that makes a lot of sense, because it's basically the same thing, like the same catchiness of that story that made you want to share it on Facebook is the same emotion that makes you want to click on the listing in a search listing. And then both Facebook and Google employ machine learning algorithms that reward high click-through rate content with better visibility in the Facebook newsfeed algorithms, hence more likes and more shares, as well as better ranking in the organic search results page. So I think that's the kind of the reason for the correlation there, guys. And just give you a couple examples here of best free survey sites. That's like we're ranking on this thing. When I share this page on Facebook, it has a 7.4% engagement rate. Like the typical engagement rate for a post is 1 or 2 or 3%. This thing gets 7.4%. So there's something exciting about this, and therefore it gets the snippet. Therefore, it does really well in organic search. Therefore, it gets a high number of shares when shared on Facebook. There's a lot of other examples, but basically, we found that it was a strong relationship between high engagement rates on Facebook and high click rates on Google search. So my number 7 crazy experiment today has to do with, what's the relationship between engagement rates and conversion rates in terms of like, what are the, how are these things related? And basically, other experiments was about driving more traffic by raising your click-through rates. What happens to the conversion rates? Well, the conversion rates get higher the higher your click-through rates. So if you can get people more and more excited to click on your organic search listings, they're more likely to sign up for your offer or buy your thing. Why? Because the excitement that you used to get them to click on the thing will carry through to doing whatever you were hoping for them to do when they visit your site. Guys, my last crazy experiment for today is around bounce rate and how does it impact SEO rankings. So bounce rate, I just wanted to use this time-lapse photography idea. So like, let's take a snapshot of this blog from December from 2015, and basically this is a comparison report for time on page, and the pages that were driving the most organic traffic to this site, 2/3 of them had positive time on site where it was like above average, and 1/3 of them were donkeys that had below average time on page. All right, so what if you change the date range from 2015 to 2016 through to 2017, just this year, what you can see is that all of the pages that are driving the organic page or organic traffic have above average time on page, okay, except for those 2 donkeys. But I think those donkeys are like endangered species. They're going to be taken out any day now, and so basically that should prove to you that somehow Google has jiggered their algorithm between 2015 and 2017 to kind of remove the below average time on page pages out of their rankings such that they don't contribute too much to SEO traffic anymore. So those are my 7 crazy experiments. There, I said 7, but actually it was 8 because like I'm all about value and I wanted to provide an extra experiment in there, bonus one. But basically, if I could summarize, it has to do with click-through rates. The higher the click-through rate, it's gonna. If you can get higher than average expected click-through rates, you're going to get better. You're going to get better rankings. This notion of dwell time and time on site, those also are being checked by Facebook and Google. And finally, this kind of interesting that if you raise your click-through rates, not only will you do great in SEO, but other systems like pay-per-click advertising, like conversion rate optimization, and Facebook, the paid and organic newsfeed stuff will also do very well because they also look for high engagement content and reward it dramatically with better engagement and lower cost per click and better conversion rates. And so, if there's one thing that I would be auditing in my accounts for, it would be for looking for high click-through rates, because that seems to be the key. Guys, here's kind of a high-level picture of what's happening in your traffic. And again, I'm using time-lapse photography, taking the pictures of the same thing over time. So in 2015, August, I'm a columnist for Inc. magazine. They send out the list of here's the top 10 columns for the month, and here's how much traffic it drove. Okay, so in 2015, you can see how that's the green line, where the number 1, number 2, number 3 articles, they're more or less doing similar, around 200,000 views per article. But then if you fast forward a year into 2016, it's starting to become a little bit more parabolic. And then in 2017, like last month in August, the first 2 stories, like the top 2 stories for the month of August 2017, generated more traffic than numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 combined. So basically what's happening is these algorithms are changing the distribution of traffic such that it's becoming increasingly winner take all. And so I think that it's really time to adjust your content strategy. It's not about ranking on a gazillion keywords. It's kind of trying to make the most of the few that's gonna kind of do really, really well. It's not just about SEO, by the way. It's also about Facebook shares. Facebook employs the same machine learning algorithms that reward engagement. And look at 2015, the top 10 stories on Inc. They had around similar amounts of shares, but then if you look at 2016, it's like the top 2 most popular stories generated more shares than everything else combined. And so that's kind of the trend, and I expect that to continue in 2017 and beyond. So what does it all mean? So I think that the to-do list is that we need to increase your click-through rates and increase the dwell time. And I just wanted to give you 3 crazy ideas on how to do this. 3 new SEO weapons to boost your click-through rates. Number 1, it's the donkey detector. Basically, you need to figure out what's the organic click-through rate and whether or not it's any good or not. And so what you do is you just download this data from the Google Search Console, like all the click-through rate and keyword data. Now, to determine if we're looking at donkeys or unicorns, we need to kind of rank those click-through rates and keywords based on whether or not they're doing better or worse than average. Because here's the thing, the click-through rates varies greatly based on different industries. So if you've got one of these, the sponsored shopping ad blocks, that'll soak up 66% of the clicks of this page. So the click-through rates are very different. So what you need to do is just index your click-through rates based on your own niche. Take your own data, plot the average click-through rates for your own industry. See that red line? That's sort of the average click-through rate for this industry. So 30% is an average click-through rate for position number 1. 15% is an average click-through rate for position number 2. But you see how they're all over the place? There's donkeys and unicorns. There's some pages are doing way better than average, and some pages are doing much worse than average in terms of their click-through rates. And so we need to just discern the difference between donkeys and unicorns. The donkeys are going to be kind of your bottom 10% of keywords. Those are doing click-through rates that are 3 times worse than average. Conversely, your unicorns are your top 10% of content and pages. Those tend to get click-through rates 2 times better than average. We want to turn donkeys into unicorns. We never want to turn unicorns into donkeys. Okay, so if you have a page that already has a pretty high click-through rate, don't mess around with it. Like you have so much to lose and nothing to gain. You see what I'm saying? What we're going to do is only only muck around with the donkeys, because there you have nothing to lose. Like the worst you can do is create a crappy click-through rate. Nothing to lose, but it was already crappy. But it's all upside potential. You see what I'm saying? It's like if you can turn your donkey into a unicorn, then you can increase your traffic by 6 times. So the donkey to unicorn converter basically says to not use these stupid SEO heavy title tags where you kind of put the keyword in the front. I know they all don't work. It's because basically it's the exact same thing as dynamic keyword insertion for pay-per-click advertising, and I know that these ads tend to do okay. They do kind of upper middle class. They do slightly above average, but when it comes to getting unusually high click-through rates, like the unicorn click-through rates, then actually the dynamic keyword insertion does worse than manually written headlines. And so to create the most catchy headlines, there's just 3 things you need to know. One is to leverage the emotional triggers. So these 9 emotions make people click like crazy. We're going to take one of these hooks, then we're going to write the headline not from an SEO perspective, but from the perspective of one of these 4 personas: the hero, the villain, the comedian, the feel-good friend, or the bearer of bad news. And then we're going to put the emotional hook and the persona into this title template that is used by viral articles on BuzzFeed. It's the format, emotional hook, content type, and topic. And so basically, the chances of finding a unicorn are rare because unicorns are rare. It's top 5%. So you kind of need to test a lot of different headlines because it's not like you're going to find it right away. And so what people make a mistake is they often just write one headline. This is actually the same headline 4 times with different capitalizations and different punctuations and different, it's the same thing. What you need to do is come up with 10 completely different angles, different personas, different emotional triggers, and then what we need to do is figure out which one of these is the winner. I don't know which one is the winner, but what you do is you just run an AdWords test or a Facebook test where you just buy $10 worth of ads or $50 worth of ads and just drive traffic to these to the same page, but using different headlines. And the headline that has the highest click-through rate is the winner. You just switch out the old headline with the winner of this test. See, the worst thing that you can do is just doing a bunch of testing, SEO testing on the page, because then Google keeps reindexing your headline, thinking like, what the heck is going on with this page? The headline keeps changing. You see what I'm saying? We just want to change it once and then be done with it. And so you have to test these things first on Facebook or AdWords, see what has the highest click-through rate, and then change it later. My third SEO weapon has to do with off-topic content and social media ads. So basically, guys, I'm telling you that the goal here is to raise your click-through rates. Okay, so the most powerful way to raise your click-through rates is to make sure that people have heard of you before. Okay, so let me give you an example here. So brand affinity dramatically impacts click-through rates. Basically, it's like if people have heard of you, like repeat visitors, people who've heard of you before, those people have double or triple the click-through rates of new visitors, of people who haven't visited you before and have no brand affinity. And it's not just about click-through rate boosting, it also increases your conversion rates. Higher, if they've heard of you before, they'll be 2 to 3 times more likely to convert. So there's no greater hack for raising conversion rates than raising brand affinity, because people don't just click on things randomly, they click on the brands that they've heard of before. So basically, if you're just showing up in organic search at the last minute, hoping that they're going to click on your thing, even if they haven't heard of you, you're kind of facing a losing battle here, because they're not just going to be a little bit more biased towards clicking on the brands they've heard of. It's 2 to 3 times more likely to click on the ones they've heard of. So what you do is you make people aware of you before they search. So the way you do this is through Facebook ads. So think about your target audience. Are there certain characteristics or behaviors or demographics of these people that you want to target, and then run ads in front of them so that later, when they do search for you, they'll say, I remember this company. So if you're a jeweler, target people who have an anniversary soon, like within the next 30 days, because those are and who are rich and who live like within a mile of your store, because those are the types of people who will be searching for stuff, in the near future. Like, so if you can kind of get in front of them before they search, that's a really key. So there's a lot of different ways to do that, like behavioral targeting. Google Display Network has custom affinity audiences. That's where you target people who visit certain web pages, and so it's pay-per-click advertising, but the point of this is to create brand affinity, which will then impact your click-through rates, which will then dramatically impact your SEO. The other thing you can do if you're allergic to buying ads, you can create a content strategy that is related to content that is outside of your niche. So except sort of connecting to the customers earlier in the funnel. So what I mean by this is, like, there's all these tools, like Facebook has audience insights, Twitter has audience insights, Google has audience insights. It'll tell you kind of the demographics and interests of your customers. Like, so for example, 70% of my customers are into entrepreneurship. So what I do is I take 20% of my content creation efforts and budget towards creating and promoting kind of off-topic content that has nothing to do with pay-per-click advertising, but it allows me to engage with my target customers before they decide to buy AdWords software, because that way, later when they do decide to buy AdWords software, they'll click on my ad or my organic listing because they've heard of me before. Final summary, guys. Basically, the coolest thing about this unicorn land strategy here that I'm talking about is that there's this virtuous cycle. So if you can get your click-through rates up and your conversion rates, well, then that by itself is better. You're going to get more clicks and conversions. But what I'm telling you is that if you increase those click-through rates and conversions, Google will notice that. It'll notice that people are converting higher. It'll notice that people are staying on your site longer, and it'll notice that your listings are very catchy. And so it'll then reward you with even better rankings, which means even more clicks and conversions. So around and around we go. It just gets better and better, and that is the path to unicorn land. So thank you. You just be a unicorn in a sea of donkeys. And let's just turn things over to Vanish. Is there any questions for today regarding this stuff?
Awesome. Thanks, Larry. That was terrific information as always. Fantastic webinar. And I love the unicorn donkey analogy. It never grows old. Always love that. Always love to see the visual representations of that as well. So there are a few questions that are coming in, Larry. The first question has to do with boosting of social posts. So the question is it a wise idea to essentially boost some of your prominent posts or content that you want to feature and try and get better click-through rates, buy some advertising dollars, boost them on Facebook, boost it on Twitter? Do you think that's a good idea and that's going to impact the SEO strategy overall if we spend some money in social?
Oh yeah. So first of all, thank you for that nice comment about my donkeys and unicorns. I do appreciate that. They take forever to create, thousands and thousands of dollars of designer time. Just kidding. The reason why I do the donkeys and unicorns is because it's memorable. So like,
True.
if you think about all the things that people read and stuff, there's so much stuff. So it really needs to have a hook that people can remember, so that I can create this kind of brand recall, okay? So that later, when they search for AdWords stuff, they might make that connection between Larry and the unicorns and my ad. You see what I'm saying? So that raises the click-through rates. So by doing something that's catchy and memorable, that's exactly the strategy. And so the question from the user is, should I be boosting my content on Facebook, as an SEO strategy? Absolutely. You absolutely have to be doing this because, you can't buy your SEO rankings, but you can buy brand affinity, right? And brand affinity dramatically increases the click-through rates, which dramatically impacts the rankings. So what I would be doing is I would be defining personas targeting personas in your your Facebook ad system, like what are the ages of the people who tend to visit your site? Maybe it's like men between the ages of 30 and 50. Like you're selling some kind of a luxury brand for like old people or something. You know what I mean? Like you got to just map out those things. And what are their other interests? Like, oh, they like their frequent flyers, or they spend a lot on expensive SUVs or something like this. You just map out your persona, because all of those are targetable attributes within Facebook. And then you spend money to get this memorable content. It has to be memorable. It has to have my example was this donkeys and unicorns, but the point was that's not going to be a great fit for like a luxury brand or something. But the point is it has to be memorable, otherwise it won't work. But if it's like something catchy and memorable, then that's going to create the brand affinity that creates the higher click-through rates. So yeah,
Gotcha.
What do you think?
Gotcha. No, that's great, Larry. I think that makes a lot of sense. Another question that's coming in is with reference to location and SEO ranks. Now, we all know that the location has a direct impact on the first page listings that you're seeing in Google, especially if it's like local search, local queries. Google's obviously going to try and map out the results based on the centroid and your specific location. How do we get around that? So let's say that if we are a brand that has a national presence as well as a local presence, how do we get around to showing ourselves more prominently in the first page of Google? Is it creating like more localized content for that specific area? Like, how do we get around this whole IP address targeting that Google's algorithm is establishing, as a part of their ranking factors?
So that one, that's a tough one, as I do not claim to be a local SEO expert. However, I do think that a lot of the, like a kind of a hack would be to just, it's basically buying the sponsored ads, right? So like, if it's like a tight geography, like, just 1 mile around your store, and you have like 3 stores, in these 3 different locations, I would just be running those local ad, awareness ads, and they're trying to take over they're basically taking over the organic packs anyways.
Sure.
But like I don't have any experiments right now on how to outrank the local filters.
Okay. Fair enough. But I guess, just really focusing a lot on like content, localized content, providing city or location specific content in your articles, and then optimizing them, I guess, would probably help. But definitely an experiment worth considering. Should be interesting.
Awesome.
All right. And then a couple of more questions, Larry. I know we're running short of time here. One of the questions that's coming up is, okay, what are 3 SEO blogs that you couldn't do without? There's tons of influencers out there, Neil Patel, Rand, SEO Roundtables, a bunch of influencers out there. If you had to narrow the list down to 3 influencers that you pay particular attention to, who would they be?
The one that I read the most is a guy named Brian Dean. He's Backlinko.
Yep.
So he does fantastic stuff on like link building. He's actually kind of we've run similar experiments on the click-through rate stuff, and he's seen the same results. And so that leads me to believe that he knows what he's doing and stuff like that. There's still a lot of SEOs that think that click-through rates are just nonsense. So I wouldn't read those. So Brian Dean. Another one is maybe a guy named Glenn Gabe. That's G Squared Interactive. So if you need to do research on penalties, or penalties and like Panda Penguin, that kind of stuff. Like he actually publishes data, like customer data that actually shows, what happened and why, as opposed to like all these other people who are just like kind of just, oh, trust me, I'm an expert, I'm a ninja. like yeah. Duh. So Glenn Gabe, Brian Dean. I think the other thing I like is they're kind of younger. Some of these SEOs are like dinosaurs. They're
right.
like 250 years old or something, and it's like they're just a little like not really like up to date on the latest.
Right, right, right. Okay, interesting. So Glenn, Gabe, Brian, Dean. If you had to give us another name, who would that be?
Like those two really stand out in my mind. Like
Okay.
happy with that enough.
Brian's courses are amazing. I mean, as a matter of fact, a strong proponent of Brian's methodologies, philosophy, and skyscraper techniques, and his course, SEO That Works Ourselves. We did the course last year. His Facebook group in the course is pretty awesome. So I love Brian's stuff. He's a terrific mentor to have for sure. All right, one more question.
Maybe
Sorry.
a
Okay, go
third
ahead.
one would be Distilled. Will Critchlow at
Yeah. Yep.
Distilled. He
Okay.
he runs a conference called Search Love, and it's he's all into testing of SEO stuff. So like basically, I'm very impressed by the SEOs who have some kind of a mathematical or rigorous process behind
Right, as
their
opposed to just making generic comments out there, right? Yeah, makes sense.
so some loudmouth like, oh, Google says.
Right, right, exactly, exactly. All right, got time for one more, Larry. So your tech stack for SEO personally, three or four tools that you couldn't live without. Now you already mentioned the Search Console, terrific information there. Mapping out click-through rates using the Search Console, great. Some other tools, like three or four tools that are a part of your SEO tech stack that you use
So
regularly.
Facebook audience insights is so important. Like
Interesting, interesting.
nobody uses this. It's audience insights. Okay, it's kind of like this thing here that I was showing you earlier, where it shows you like what are their of the people who are consuming this content,
Mhm.
what are their interests, what are their job titles, what are their ages, what are their genders. Like it's slicing and dicing the people that are viewing your different types of content, or different, like you can upload a custom list, for example. You could upload your customer list, and then you could have the audience insight manager for Facebook kind of slice and dice that data into 1,000 different kind of segments. So you could it's like surveying your customers without having to survey them, because Facebook just matches up the emails with
Right.
the emails they have on file. So like my point is that once you have that data, that can inform sort of what are the topics that are going to make these people like want to click on stuff like crazy, and then that's going to make or break your SEO strategy. I actually think the audience insight tool is I think it's more valuable than the Google keyword tool, like because it's telling me more about the people behind those searches, because like
Mhm.
not 100% of the people who are searching for this keyword are actually my target market. It's usually like 2 or 3% of them are.
For sure. And I bet the accuracy is also pretty good, because these are people that have Facebook profiles, and they probably have accurate information there. So Facebook's extracting all that data and info and then matching that up with the buyer profile for you, right? So I guess the accuracy is going to be pretty high.
Yeah, like people, like there's this old hack where if you wanted to estimate a market for a certain product, you would look at keyword volumes, and I think that's so primitive. Like what you need to do is say, like, I'm selling boats to rich people, in this geography. How many
Hmm.
people are there? You see what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
Facebook will give you that answer because it gives you estimates on how big the audiences are. And I think that's a really key tool, because now the future of SEO isn't about just keywords and links. It's about matching intent. So that means you have to really understand who these searchers are, and figure out what makes them tick. One other tool that I would strongly suggest is BuzzSumo. The reason for BuzzSumo, I'm sure you've heard of it before, but if it's all about click-through rates, right? I already told you today that stuff that gets a lot of shares tends to do well in search. Why? Because the same emotions that make people want to share things are the same emotions that make people want to click on things. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So you can kind of use a tool like BuzzSumo as a click-through rate unicorn detector. You're saying like stuff that has unusually high number of shares. Those are very likely to do very good in organic search as well, if you could kind of just tweak the title a little bit. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I definitely recommend that as well. It's pretty awesome. And I guess you don't even need to be a paid user, because you can just type in a specific keyword search query, and it's going to give you like the best content pieces associated with like social shares, etc. Right? So
Of
it's
course.
pretty cool.
But
Uh,
you
yeah.
can
But you got
subscribe.
Yeah,
buy
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, for sure, absolutely. You got to give back too. If you're getting value
So
out.
like,
Uh,
help them pay for their bills.
Totally, totally. If you had to give us another tool, Larry, what would that be? So we got BuzzSumo, we got Facebook Audience Insights. What's another one that is a core part of your tech stack?
Well, it's just Excel, so I just do a lot of math, and like as you saw the charts and stuff.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, so just Excel is one of those things where everyone knows it a little bit,
Right,
but like,
right, right.
you know, I would invest in you know, learning on how to create, you know, functions and
Pivot
graphs
tables and
and
everything,
pivot
right?
tables and stuff. Because if you don't know how to do that, you're really at a disadvantage because like
Very
you
true.
won't really be able to analyze any of this data that you're looking at. But the good news is that it's such a popular tool that there's like a gazillion courses like online and free that you can just become an expert in this stuff in like a month or something. You know.
Oh, for sure, definitely. Larry, we're out of time, but I just want to thank you once again. This has been a terrific session. The information that you presented was fantastic, and personally, even for me, especially the snippets part was like so interesting. Definitely want to pay more attention to that. Thanks once again, Larry. I know that you have gone into another venture now. Very excited to hear about it. You'd mentioned that stuff's going to be ready for us and the entire WSI network in the next couple of months. So we'll work with you, and once the product's ready, you would love to sort of like get a first-hand experience of what that product's all about, and position that to the network as well. So thanks for your
Awesome,
time. I know you're super busy. Thanks for your time. Great having
awesome,
you.
and thanks so much for having me. And I hope you're able to replicate some of these experiments and weapons for yourself and for your clients. Have a great day.
Absolutely. Thanks, Larry. Take care. Thanks,
Bye bye.
everyone. Bye bye.